Have you ever uncovered a truth you'll never forget? When I was hired as a night shift nurse at Cedar Valley Hospital, there was this patient named Anthony who came in every Friday like clockwork. He'd always bring his dad, Richard, who had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Richard would get his chemo treatment while Anthony sat beside him, cracking jokes and showing him funny videos on his phone. The other nurses adored them. Anthony was this young, charming guy who remembered everyone's names and always brought donuts for the staff. One night, Richard started sobbing during his treatment. He grabbed my hand and told me how grateful he was for Anthony. He gave up his law career to take care of me. Drives 3 hours every week just to get me here. I don't deserve a son like him. But something felt off. Anthony's medical knowledge seemed too perfect, like he'd studied from a textbook. He could recite Richard's exact dosages and knew complex terminology that most family members wouldn't know. Then one Friday, Anthony was running late. Richard was getting anxious, his blood pressure spiking. "He's never late," he kept saying. "Something must be wrong." I tried calling the number we had on file, but it went straight to voicemail. 2 hours later, Richard was still alone and getting increasingly agitated. I decided to check Anthony's emergency contact information. That's when I noticed something strange. His listed address didn't exist. I Googled the law firm where he claimed to work. Nothing came up. My stomach dropped. I dug deeper into Richard's files and discovered his real son, the actual Anthony, had died in a car crash 6 months ago. Yet here was this imposter showing up every week, playing the role of devoted son. I called security and the police. They ran the security footage through their database and identified him as Thomas Walker, a serial scammer who targeted elderly cancer patients. He'd research their families, learn their stories, then pose as their relatives to gain their trust. But this was different. Usually he'd steal their money or jewelry. With Richard, he hadn't taken anything. He just showed up every week for months. When the police caught him, Thomas broke down. Turns out his own father had died of pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. He'd been too busy with work to visit him during treatment. The guilt ate him alive. So he started visiting other cancer patients, playing the son he wished he'd been. He memorized their medical charts, learned their family histories, created elaborate backstories. The hardest part was telling Richard. He refused to believe it at first. "But he knows about my fishing trips in Colorado," he kept saying. "He remembers my wife's lasagna recipe." I had to explain how Thomas had likely gotten those details from social media and conversations at the hospital. Richard stopped his treatments after that, said he couldn't bear to come back to the place where he'd been living a lie. A month later, I heard he'd passed away at home. The police found dozens of journals in Thomas's apartment. Each one detailed a different patient's life, their favorite foods, childhood stories, family traditions. He'd written Richard's name over and over, alongside the words, "I'm sorry, Dad." Thomas got 15 years for identity theft and fraud. Last week, I got a letter from Thomas in prison. Inside was a check for $50,000, everything he'd stolen from other patients over the years. He asked me to return it to their families. At the bottom, he wrote, "Tell Richard's wife I'm sorry. Her lasagna recipe really was the best." I burned the letter and sent the money to the victims.